The scene opens with intense atmospheric music. The camera slowly zooms in on a vast, unexplored planet. Lush landscapes, dark jungles, and towering alien structures. A shadowy figure appears against the horizon. Imagine a world unlike any other. A planet teeming with strange creatures, brutal predators, and an atmosphere that defies everything you know about survival. Now picture this: a group of elite alien cadets, trained for war, thrown into the heart of this savage world. And they have no idea what's coming. But one human, just one, will lead them on a journey they never expected. A journey that will teach them more than survival. It will teach them what it means to understand, to truly understand this world. The rules are simple. Laugh at Earth's gravity, and you may just learn the hard way that nothing on this planet is as it seems. And no one, not even the mightiest, can escape the lessons Earth has to offer. Are you ready to watch? Because this is no ordinary story. This is a journey of survival, discovery, and the shocking truths that await when alien cadets face the ultimate test on Earth. The dropship cut through Earth's atmosphere like a blade through cloth, heat shields glowing amber against the morning sky. Inside, 12 Tarsian cadets bounced gently in their padded harnesses, joking in their gravelly tongue. They looked like walking obsidian, 7 feet tall, jet-black skin with bioluminescent veins pulsating in shades of indigo, muscles like braided steel cables. Born on Tarvis Prime, a planet with gravity so light you could sneeze yourself into orbit. One of them, Vrel, the supposed top of his class, grinned through fanged teeth. This gravity, I can feel it. It tickles. He flexed, rolling his shoulders. I'll ask for double resistance bands. Maybe Earthlings use this as rehab. The others roared with laughter, their voices vibrating the cabin walls. They'd trained on moons, fought simulated wars in zero-G domes, and sparred with AI gladiators. What could one muddy, backwater planet possibly offer? The dropship touched down with a heavy thunk that rattled their bones more than they cared to admit. The rear bay doors hissed open with a dramatic exhale of hydraulic steam. A burst of Earth's crisp mountain air filled the compartment. It smelled like pine, damp soil, and an overwhelming sense of challenge. They stepped out, swagger in their stride, pupils dilating as they adjusted to the light, and were greeted by a sight that made them pause. A vast clearing nestled in the Rockies, jagged peaks clawing at the clouds like frozen titans. A line of camouflaged prefabs sat squat at the edge of a dense forest. The ground was uneven, the air thinner than any of them were used to. Waiting for them stood a lone human figure. He wasn't tall, didn't look like much. No fancy exosuit, just olive green fatigues, combat boots caked in mud, and a pair of sunglasses that had seen too many sunrises. Alan Wells, retired Earth Forces Sergeant, age 53. Multiple tours across Mars, Ganymede, and the hell ice trenches of Enceladus. He didn't salute, didn't smile, just chewed on a toothpick and squinted like he'd already sized them up and found them lacking. You the alien kids? He asked, voice low and sharp like gravel under boots. Vrel stepped forward. We are the elite, the best of the Tarsian warrior academies. Good, Alan interrupted. Then you'll enjoy our first exercise. The cadets glanced at each other. No formal orientation, no introductions, just like that. Alan turned and began walking toward the tree line. We're going for a hike. A hike, one cadet scoffed. That's the Earthling term for leisurely walk, correct? Alan didn't answer. They followed, snickering. Vrel rolled his neck and whispered, let's humor him. Can't be worse than a gravity gauntlet. 5 minutes in, their laughter died. The trail wasn't a trail. It was a narrow, muddy incline littered with fallen logs, rocks slick with moss, and thickets that clawed at their legs. The Earth gravity, the very thing they mocked, was now hugging their lungs like a vice. Muscles strained, breathing quickened, sweat poured in thick, salty sheets. By mile 1, the first cadet stumbled. By mile 2, 2 more were panting so loud birds took flight. Alan never slowed. He hiked like gravity didn't exist for him. Every step precise, every breath controlled. This isn't a test, he called back without turning. This is your introduction. Welcome to Earth. She don't care who you are. She's ancient, stubborn, and merciless. Vrel gritted his teeth. We are warriors. We fought on moons. Alan paused at a fork in the trail. He turned to face them. You fought simulations, trained in sterile environments, controlled heat, stable oxygen. You've never bled from a blister because a rock the size of a coin lodged in your boot for 6 miles. You've never been so cold your thoughts froze before your hands. Earth is real. She punishes arrogance. A cadet with pale, glowing stripes collapsed. Alan walked over, crouched beside him, and looked at the readout on the wristband. Elevated heart rate. Minor muscle tearing. Oxygen efficiency dropping. Get up, Alan said. I need a regen injector. Alan stood, shoved the injector into a pocket, and pointed at the trail. You need legs. Use them. The cadet stared wide-eyed. Back on Tarvis Prime, such cruelty would be considered inhumane. Here it was Tuesday. They pressed on. Rain came unexpectedly, cold, sideways, and unforgiving. Their suits, designed for vacuum and plasma, not puddles and mud, were quickly soaked. Tarsian's skin reacted poorly to cold. Their glow dimmed. Alan trudged ahead, untouched by misery, as if Earth herself parted the weather for him. By the time they reached camp, 3 cadets were limping, 2 shivering uncontrollably, and 1 was muttering something about gravity being a sadistic deity. Alan lit the fire. They gathered around, defeated but silent. Tomorrow, he said, tossing more wood into the flames, we climb. No one spoke. Even Virel, now nursing a bruised knee and a bent ego, sat quietly. He looked around. These weren't simulations. This was no VR. Every ache was real. Every blister sang with cruel honesty. And for the first time since arriving, a single thought echoed in his mind. Foreign, unwelcome, but unshakable. Maybe Earth isn't a joke. Maybe it's a battlefield, and they were the enemy. Dawn was a cruel mistress on Earth. The second the sun's edge peeled over the jagged mountain ridge, it didn't warm the cadets. It stabbed them. Blinding light bounced off dew-slicked leaves, ricocheted through mist like lasers, and landed directly into the eyes of 12 miserable Tarsians. Or rather, 9. 3 had requested medevac overnight. Their vitals had flatlined into borderline cardiac distress. Alan approved the extraction without ceremony. No speeches. Just a grunt and a thumb toward the sky when the evac drone hovered down. The remaining cadets didn't ask questions. They were too tired. Too sore. Virel, once the loudest of them all, was silent. He'd spent the night shivering under his thermal tarp, staring up at Earth's sky, thicker, cloudier, heavier than any sky should be. Tarvis Prime had always felt like standing atop a cloud. Earth felt like being buried under it. And Alan Wells? He was already up, humming something off-key while boiling water over a fire that had burned through the night. Morning, snowflakes, he said. Today we meet the beast. No one responded. Maybe they thought he was joking. Virel wasn't sure anymore. Alan threw each of them a ration bar. Tarsian digestive systems hated Earth protein. It made their stomachs churn, but no one dared complain. He pointed toward a trail that wasn't a trail, just a steep slope of shale and shadow. We climbed the Devil's Backbone, 8 miles up, 3,000 feet of elevation. Don't worry, it only looks impossible. Rel forced himself upright. His joints protested. His boots had dried with mud so thick it felt like stone. He tried to stretch. His hamstring screamed. Behind him, another cadet groaned. This is barbaric. Alan snapped his fingers. That's the spirit. Earth is barbaric. You're finally catching on. They began the climb. At first, it was a silent march. No banter. No arrogance. Each step a negotiation between pain and pride. The incline was merciless. Loose rock gave way underfoot, sending several skidding onto their hands. Virel slipped once, twice. On the third time, he growled in frustration and punched a tree. The bark tore his knuckles. He didn't care. And then came the beast. Not a creature, but a stretch of vertical granite slicked by a waterfall, with only ancient iron pegs drilled into the face, remnants of an old Earth climbing route from centuries ago. Alan strapped on gloves and clipped himself into a fraying rope that looked more like a museum relic than rescue gear. 2 rules, he said. Don't look down and don't fall. One cadet, Jay Carr, the smallest of the group, hesitated. We have no harnesses. This is unsanctioned. Alan didn't blink. Neither is dying in war. Go. One by one, the cadets began to climb. Hands trembling, feet slipping, hearts pounding against rib cages like fists on prison walls. Earth's gravity, unforgiving and constant, pulled at every muscle. Virel's arms burned, his vision blurred. He glanced down once. Missed. 1,000 feet below. His grip faltered. He heard a scream. One of the cadets slipped, dangled from a peg, flailing. Alan reacted instantly. He swung out like a pendulum, grabbed the cadet's collar, and hauled him back with a grunt. No tech. No anti-grav harness. Just raw strength and a dead stare. You fall, Alan said. You better have wings. Otherwise, fly lessons are over quick. They reached the summit 4 hours later. Virel collapsed on the stone plateau, gasping. His fingertips were raw. His knees ached. Behind him, the other cadets dropped like toppled statues. One vomited. Another cried softly. Alan remained standing. "Nice view, huh?" he said, and it was. Beyond the edge, the Rockies stretched like ripples in the Earth's skin. Clouds sailed below them. A bald eagle cut the sky with military precision, but none of the cadets admired it. They were too broken, too human. That's when Alan pulled out a weather-beaten metal flask and tossed it to Vrel. "Water," he said, "with electrolytes, not that space slop you drink." Vrel sipped. It tasted like life. Alan crouched beside him. "You thought Earth was weak, a joke, just a softball planet with outdated tech." Vrel didn't reply. Alan leaned in, voice low, rough. "This planet forged me, and I'm nothing compared to what she's done to others. Earth doesn't give out strength. She demands it. She doesn't train warriors. She burns away weakness until only warriors remain." Vrel swallowed hard. He felt the truth of it in every throbbing muscle, every pulsing vein. The sergeant stood and stared at the horizon. "Tomorrow," he said, "you'll meet the rain caves." Someone whimpered. "Pack light," Alan added. "You won't be walking. You'll be crawling." Then he turned, his silhouette sharp against the blazing sky, and began the trek down, like gravity still hadn't figured out how to weigh him down. The cadets lay in silence, broken but breathing, and in that silence something shifted. Not surrender. Not yet. But respect. Not for the man, but for the world beneath them. Earth. Beautiful, unforgiving, and absolutely feral. Rain on Earth was supposed to be poetic, romantic, a gentle kiss from the sky. At least that's what the media archives said. But not here, not in this place. Alan Wells called them the rain caves. The cadets later called them the mouths of hell, because when the storm rolled in that morning, it didn't fall, it attacked. Vrel had never seen anything like it. The rain came sideways, whipped by howling wind, each droplet a needle. Within minutes, their gear was soaked. Boots squelched with every step. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. Visibility sank to arm's length. They were hiking through a narrow gorge, the trail barely wide enough for one at a time, with cliffs rising on both sides like jagged fangs. And Alan? He whistled as he walked, like it was just another Tuesday stroll through the neighborhood's swamp of despair. "I thought Earth's weather patterns were mapped," yelled Jakar, his voice barely audible over the roar. Alan shouted back, "They are! Doesn't mean they give a damn what you want." The cadets trudged on, shivering. And then, as if the sky hadn't insulted them enough, they reached the caves. They weren't actual caves, more like deep holes carved into the cliffside by centuries of erosion. Black mouths with no visible end, slick with moss and echoing with something that sounded disturbingly organic. Alan stopped in front of one. "Who's feeling brave?" he asked casually, wiping water from his face with a handkerchief that looked more like an oil rag. No one volunteered. So naturally, Alan chose Vrel. "You're squad leader, right?" Alan said. "Lead." Vrel wanted to argue, to scream that this was a death trap, that no military manual ever covered spelunking through unknown wet holes with alien fauna. But he didn't, because something had changed in him since the climb. Pride, maybe. Or something worse, curiosity. He turned on his helmet light and crawled in. The ceiling was low, forcing him to belly crawl. Mud squelched under his armor. The smell was a mix of mildew, rot, and regret. Something skittered across his glove. He tried not to think about it. Behind him, the others followed. Alan naturally brought up the rear, whistling a tune from something called Metallica. Halfway through, Vrel's light flickered, then died. Total darkness. Breathing became louder. Claustrophobia slithered into his brain like a parasite. He heard someone whimper. Maybe it was him. Then a sound. It echoed from deeper within the tunnel. Not water, not wind. Movement. Wet, deliberate movement. The cadets froze. Alan didn't. "Time to meet the locals," he said. A click. Then a flare ignited in his hand, bathing the cave in crimson glow, and there it was. A creature the size of a small transport, with 8 legs and skin like wet glass. Not aggressive. Just watching. Alan didn't flinch. Cave loper, mostly blind, feels vibration. If you run, it'll chase. No one moved. The creature shifted, antennae twitching. Vrel could hear its breath, if that's what that low gurgle was. Alan pulled something from his pack and tossed it gently to the side. A small metal cube. It emitted a soft hum. The creature turned and slithered toward it, drawn to the sound. "Move," Alan whispered. They crawled past in silence, every heartbeat a drum, every exhale a risk. 10 agonizing minutes later, they emerged, muddy, soaked, and alive. Barely. They collapsed in a clearing, just as the rain stopped, like the planet was done playing with them for now. Alan stood over them, arms crossed. "Fear teaches faster than lectures," he said. "So what did you learn?" No one answered. Not immediately. Then Jakar, of all people, spoke. "That Earth is a predator." Alan smiled. "Correct." He tossed them ration bars and began building another fire. "And you've just walked through her open mouth," he added. "But that was just her throat. Tomorrow we hit the gut." Silence. Vrel sat, trembling. He stared at his hands. They were cut, dirtied, shaking slightly. But beneath the fear, something else stirred. A thrill. The challenge had awakened something ancient, something primal. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to survive instead of win. And for the first time, he looked at Sergeant Alan Wells not as a relic of a backwater planet, but as a creature bred by a world far deadlier than they'd ever imagined. By dawn, the jungle looked almost welcoming. Almost. Birds chirped overhead, except they weren't birds, not really. The cadets had long stopped trying to classify Earth's fauna. Too many legs, too many eyes, too many noises that sounded like dying machinery. Alan was already up, of course. The man never seemed to sleep. "Today," he said over burnt coffee, "we test your adaptability." That word didn't land well. Jakar groaned. Zil kept checking his biomonitor like it might offer an escape route. Even Virel flinched. But Alan didn't wait. He handed them gear, old-fashioned rope, steel pythons, a compass for crying out loud, and led them down a trail that barely qualified as a suggestion on the terrain. 3 hours in, they reached the canyon. It was a scar in the earth, a gaping wound stretching for miles. Fog clung to its edges like a warning, and deep inside, the sound of rushing water echoed up in rhythmic pulses, like the heartbeat of something asleep and enormous. Alan grinned like he was home. "We're going down there," he said. "No dropships, no hover pads, just their feet, their hands, and an absurd amount of trust in ancient Earth climbing equipment." "You're kidding," Zil whispered. "I don't kid. I don't kid," Alan replied. "I train. Now clip in." The descent was grueling. Every meter down stripped away another layer of the cadets' bravado. Their muscles screamed, their fingers bled. The gravity, the cursed, ever-persistent gravity, felt like it had opinions today. Halfway down, a rock slide nearly took out Jakar. Alan caught him with one arm like the man was carved from rebar in spite. "Don't flail," he warned. "Earth rewards confidence, punishes doubt." They finally touched bottom just as the sun vanished behind the ridge, and then the real test began. The river wasn't just a river, it was alive. Vrel could feel it, some deep instinctual awareness that this water wasn't just moving through the canyon, it was moving with intent. Currents twisted unnaturally, eddies formed and vanished, and those weren't fish. Alan slapped a makeshift raft together with planks and inflated bladders that looked disturbingly like lungs. "On board," he said. "No engines?" Zil asked. "No engines, just oars. I want to see how well you read the world." They launched into the current, and the canyon changed. Shadows deepened, the cliffs narrowed, strange vines hung like nooses from above. There was no wind, yet the air felt like it breathed. The water hissed against the hull like a warning. Then came the eyes. Dozens, hundreds, reflections in the water, hidden behind vines, embedded in the walls themselves, not blinking, not watching with curiosity, but calculating. Jakar hissed, "What is this place?" Alan, calm as ever, kept paddling. "Earth's older than your archives. Some corners were never mapped. Some were deliberately forgotten." The raft jerked. Something had brushed beneath it, a long shape, then another. "Keep still," Alan whispered. "They don't like sudden movement." Too late. Zil panicked, grabbing his blaster. "Don't," Alan started. Zil fired. The beam scorched the water, sending up a plume of steam. And that's when everything erupted. Tentacles, not real tentacles, but fluid constructs, maybe, rose from the water. The raft splintered, screams rang out. The current surged like it had teeth. Vrel grabbed Jakar's arm as they were swept apart. Alan bellowed something over the chaos, but the river devoured it. Darkness swallowed Vrel whole. Cold. Silence. Then, light. He surfaced in a quiet pool, gasping. Alone. The cliffs had changed, now smoother like ancient ruins. Markings etched into the stone glowed faintly. Symbols, mathematical maybe, or warnings. Vrel climbed onto the rocks, panting, footsteps. Alan emerged from the shadows, soaked but smiling. "Congratulations," he said. "You passed." "Passed what?" Vrel snapped. "We almost died. That was the test, Alan replied, and you're still breathing. Jakar and Zil staggered into view, bruised, soaked, but alive. Alan gestured to the glowing glyphs. This place, it's a neural testing zone. Old Earth tech. Abandoned AI sentinels still guard it. React to aggression. Record emotional responses. It's a mirror for the mind. Vrel stared at him. You brought us here to fight ancient ghosts? No, Alan said. I brought you here to meet yourselves. The cadets didn't speak for a while, just stared at the symbols, the still water, the impossible architecture whispering of a civilization that came before civilization. And for the first time, they didn't feel like invaders. They felt like guests. The morning after the flood felt strangely peaceful. The cadets sat around a fire, still stunned by the events of the night before. The air had cooled, the shadows had retreated, and yet there was something unsettling in the quiet. It was too perfect, too still. All right, Alan said, breaking the silence. Today's the real test. They all looked up, confused. No, Alan continued, it's not going to be a death match in a ravine or a race against the clock. It's not even about surviving in that jungle. It's something far worse. He paused, letting the tension build. It's about finding the right hunting ground. The cadets exchanged nervous glances. Zil was the first to speak. We've been hunting for food, not predators. Alan's lips twitched. Exactly, but today the world hunts you. He didn't elaborate. Instead, he stood and waved for them to follow. They walked through the ruins of the canyon for what felt like hours, though the sun barely seemed to move in the sky. The cliffs twisted like a maze, each turn leading to another ominous stone structure or strange landmark. Every few minutes, Vrel would catch a glimpse of something moving, just a flash in the corner of his eye, but always too fast to identify. Then they stopped. They had reached a clearing. The ground was covered in large, flat stones, and the trees around them were unnaturally still. There was no sound, not a single bird, not even wind. Alan dropped to one knee, examining the ground. There it is, he murmured. Vrel saw it too, a set of tracks, large, deep impressions in the mud, each one the size of a small shuttlecraft. What made these? Jakar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Alan's face went still. The predators. There was a pause before Alan continued. Let's play their game. Play their game? Zil snapped. Are you out of your mind? We're supposed to survive. Alan turned to him. We're supposed to learn. That's the whole point. Understand the world around us, not just survive, but adapt. Vrel felt the weight of Alan's words, the gravity of them pressing down like the very air around him was getting thicker. Alan stood up and motioned for them to follow. Keep your eyes open. They'll be watching. They moved into the clearing, each step measured, careful. The tracks grew deeper, more pronounced, and then, from the corner of his eye, Vrel saw it. A shadow. It moved too quickly to be anything human, too fluid, too precise. There was something about it that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Stay in formation, Alan ordered. But it was too late. A roar split the air, an ear-shattering sound that rattled the bones and shook the ground beneath their feet. From the trees, a creature emerged. It was massive, the size of a small building. It looked like a cross between a wolf and a tank, with long, sharp claws and eyes that burned with an unnatural hunger. Its skin was slick and black, covered in a layer of dark, oily scales that seemed to shift in the light. It growled low, a vibration that rattled the very earth. The cadets froze, instinctively falling into defensive positions, but Alan simply stood unarmed, watching the creature with a strange calm. You see, Alan said, his voice steady despite the danger. This is the test. Surviving isn't about defeating the predator, it's about understanding the game. Vrel barely had time to process Alan's words before the creature lunged. It moved so fast, Vrel's eyes barely followed its motion, but he felt the shift in the air as it came for them. Its jaws snapped with a terrifying speed, but Alan wasn't moving. The creature stopped just inches from Alan, its massive head looming over him. It sniffed the air, its gaze shifting from Alan to the cadets. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it backed away, its posture suddenly relaxed. Alan took a step forward, watching the creature carefully. It's a test. It isn't hunting us. It's watching us. The creature turned its head, almost in curiosity, and then, just as quickly as it had come, disappeared into the forest, vanishing like a shadow. The cadet stood frozen, too stunned to speak. Alan let out a breath, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Survival isn't just about fighting. It's about learning how to read the world around you. If you're too focused on surviving, you'll miss what's important. You're not the prey in this scenario. Not yet. He motioned for them to keep moving. Now, the real question is, and how well do you understand the game? The cadets moved in silence after the predator disappeared, the only sounds their labored breaths and the crunch of gravel beneath their boots. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on their shoulders. They had just survived their first brush with Earth's brutal wildlife, not by force, but by understanding the rules of the land, and that was something no one had expected. Alan, as usual, led the way, his steps light and confident, as if he had known all along that the creature wasn't after them. Not yet. This way, Alan said, turning down a narrow, winding path that cut through the dense jungle. It was a stark contrast to the open clearing they had just left, where the air had been too still, too quiet. Here, the air hummed with life, an almost imperceptible buzzing like the sound of the world holding its breath. The sun had dipped low by the time they reached the base of a large cliff, its face smooth and unyielding, except for the small gap between two massive boulders. Alan motioned for them to stop. "Remember the predator," Alan said. "Survival isn't just about what you see. Sometimes it's about what you don't see." Zill looked at him with confusion. "What are you?" Before he could finish, a strange sound cut through the air, a sharp metallic screech followed by the unmistakable thud of something heavy hitting the ground. "Get down!" Alan barked. The cadets instinctively dropped to the ground, their bodies pressed against the cool earth. It didn't take long for them to realize what was happening. Something was coming. Fast. From the trees above, a shadow leaped toward them. It wasn't the same creature from before. This one was smaller, sleeker, and faster, with a body built for speed. Its eyes gleamed with an unnatural intelligence as it landed with a silent thud, its claws scraping against the rock. "No," Alan said quietly. "It's a distraction." The cadets didn't understand until the second creature emerged. Larger than the first, this one wasn't built for speed. It was built for strength. Its limbs were thick and muscled, its massive frame rippling with power. Its eyes were the same burning intensity, the same hunger. But this one didn't seem interested in playing games. This one was here to hunt. It stepped forward, and the ground beneath its feet seemed to groan in protest. The smaller creature, still agile, darted between the cadets, making a quick pass at Zill before disappearing into the shadows once more. But the larger creature, it was focused. Alan stood, slowly, his hands raised in the air. "It's not about you," he said, his voice calm. "It's about me." The creature's massive head tilted, its eyes narrowing as if it were weighing Alan's words. It didn't charge. Instead, it stood there, observing. Alan's presence seemed to hold it in place, just out of reach, but never letting go. "What are you doing?" Vrel hissed, his voice a whisper of panic. "Observing," Alan replied, eyes locked on the predator. "Survival isn't just about being fast or strong, it's about controlling the situation. It's about understanding your opponent." For a moment, there was no sound but the heavy breathing of the cadets, their hearts pounding in their chests. And then, with a sudden movement, Alan broke the stillness. He didn't charge. He didn't fight. Instead, he turned his back on the creature. "Follow me," he said, his voice sharp and commanding. The cadets hesitated. The instinct to fight was ingrained in them, their training demanding immediate action in the face of danger. But they knew better than to challenge Alan's calm demeanor. They followed. The larger predator let out a growl, low and menacing. It took a step forward, its claws scraping against the earth, but it didn't follow. Alan's steps didn't falter. He didn't look back. He simply led them through the narrow gap in the rocks, into the shadow of the cliff. The predator remained behind. The cadets huddled together in the safety of the narrow space, their breaths ragged and shaky. "That," Alan said, his voice low, "wasn't a hunt. That was a test, a challenge to your instincts. What you did there was what you've been trained to do. Fight, resist, survive. But here's the trick. That creature wasn't after you." Alan paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. The cadets stayed silent, unsure how to respond. "You were the real test, not the predator." Alan's eyes gleamed with an almost mischievous light. The game wasn't about winning, it was about playing. He looked at each of them in turn, his gaze steady, unflinching. "You survived, because you adapted." The cadets sat in silence, trying to process what had just happened. Their minds were reeling. For the first time since their arrival on Earth, they realized that they weren't here to conquer. They weren't even here to survive in the traditional sense. They were here to learn. And that, Varel realized, was something far more dangerous than any predator. The silence that followed Alan's words was thick, suffocating. The cadets, still huddled together under the shadow of the massive cliff, were struggling to reconcile what had just happened. Their training, their instincts, all of it had been challenged. And they hadn't just survived, they had learned. But at what cost? Varel sat back, pressing his hand to the rough stone beneath him. His mind was whirling. Everything he had known, every bit of their rigorous training, had just been turned upside down. He had expected to fight, to endure, to conquer this alien world. But Alan had made it clear, this wasn't a battle of brawn. It was a test of mind. "You've seen it now," Alan said, breaking the silence. He looked at them with the intensity of someone who had long ago accepted the truth of this planet. Earth isn't like the worlds you're used to. It's not about power. It's not about technology. It's about resilience, cunning, perception. The words felt like a slap in the face. Zil stood up, shaking his head. "I don't understand. We can't just adapt. There has to be more to this. The predators, the creatures, the gravity. It's all too much." Alan didn't flinch. He knew this moment would come, the breaking point where the cadets' resolve would crack. "That's the point," Alan said, his voice quiet but full of authority. "You've been trained to think in terms of survival, of fighting to the death. But here, the most dangerous creature isn't the one you can see. It's the one you don't understand." He turned toward the cadets, his expression unyielding. "The real test isn't surviving the predators. It's surviving this planet, this world, Earth. It will break you if you let it." Varel looked out at the horizon, trying to grasp the meaning behind Alan's cryptic words. The land stretched out before them, a vast expanse of wilderness, jagged mountains, thick forests, and wide open plains that seemed to go on forever. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. "There's no way back," Alan continued, his voice somber. "Not until you face what's coming." A chill ran down Varel's spine. He had seen the flickers of the predator in the shadows. He had felt the shifting weight of something watching them from afar. But what was coming? What could possibly be worse than the creatures they had just encountered? "The world is alive," Alan whispered, almost to himself. "The land itself is watching you." Before anyone could respond, there was a sound. It was faint at first, barely a whisper in the wind, but it grew louder, more distinct. A rumble. The earth beneath them trembled just slightly, as if something huge was moving below them. "What is that?" J-Car asked, his voice a blend of fear and curiosity. Alan held up a hand to silence him. His eyes were scanning the horizon, his focus unbroken. He had known this would happen. He had expected it. "Get ready," he said. "It's time to go." The ground rumbled again, more forcefully this time, and the cadets felt the unmistakable pressure of something enormous moving beneath the Earth's surface. And then, from the distance, they saw it. A massive shape, rising slowly, impossibly, from the ground. It was like a mountain breaking apart. Cracks formed in the earth, splitting wide to reveal a towering, metallic structure. The sheer size of it was beyond comprehension. It seemed to reach for the sky itself, an enormous, ancient structure that looked as though it had been buried for millennia. Vrel's heart pounded in his chest. His eyes widened in disbelief. What is that?" Zil gasped. Alan was already moving, not waiting for an answer. "It's a tomb," he said, his voice grim. "The true test begins now." As they approached, the massive metallic structure began to hum, a low, deep sound that seemed to vibrate the air itself. It wasn't just a structure, it was alive. Varel could feel the pulse of it beneath his feet, as though the ground itself was holding its breath. They reached the base of the structure, and Alan led them inside. The walls were slick, made of an unknown material that shimmered faintly in the dim light. The air was thick, heavy, as though it had been trapped here for centuries. And then they saw it. A giant, round chamber lay ahead of them. It was empty, save for the enormous metal door at the far end. The door was sealed shut, but its surface shimmered with an energy that made Vrel's skin prickle. Alan stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. He placed his hand on the door. It didn't budge. "They're waiting for us," Alan said softly. "The real challenge is inside." The cadets exchanged nervous glances, but there was no turning back now. Alan turned back to them, his gaze sharp. The predators won't be the ones who kill you here. This is the real test. It will break you if you let it. The chamber echoed with the sound of their footsteps, and for the first time since they had arrived on Earth, Vrel felt the weight of what Alan had been saying. This world wasn't just a place of survival, it was a place of revelation. The doors opened, and beyond it, there was only darkness. The chamber beyond the door was black, an abyss that seemed to swallow all light. The air grew heavier, thick with anticipation. No one moved at first, not even Alan. The cadets stood frozen at the threshold, their eyes strained against the darkness, trying to make sense of what lay beyond. "This is it," Alan said, his voice strangely calm, as if he had expected this moment, this exact feeling. "This is the place where you either break or rise." Vrel could feel the weight of his words sinking in. It wasn't just survival anymore. They had stepped into something much deeper, something that tested the very core of who they were. The predators outside had been easy in comparison. Nature's rules were straightforward, brutal, but predictable. What lay beyond this door, however, was something far more elusive. Alan stepped forward, his boots making no sound on the smooth floor. The cadets followed, though their steps were hesitant. The moment they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening crash, leaving them trapped in a void of darkness. For a long time, there was nothing but the pulse of their own breathing. Suddenly, a soft, low hum filled the space. Vrel felt a shiver run down his spine as the walls seemed to shift almost imperceptibly. Then, before any of them could react, a faint glow appeared at the far end of the room. It grew brighter, brighter still, until it illuminated the space around them. The walls of the chamber flickered to life, revealing intricate patterns, symbols, etched into the surface, glowing softly with an eerie, unnatural light. The symbols were ancient, alien, their meaning lost in time. They didn't belong here. They didn't belong to this planet. "It's starting," Alan whispered. "The test." The air around them seemed to hum with the energy of the symbols, pulsing with a rhythmic pattern. The ground beneath their feet shifted again, and suddenly the entire chamber began to move. Vrel stumbled, his mind racing. The walls were alive. They were moving, shifting, changing. It was as if the chamber itself was reacting to their presence. Or perhaps to their minds. The symbols on the walls blurred into motion, twisting into impossible shapes, their meanings slipping just out of reach, like a dream you could almost grasp but never quite hold. Alan was already moving, his steps fluid, instinctual. He reached out, his hand brushing against the walls, and as his fingers made contact, a sudden surge of light exploded from the floor, rising like a column of fire. The cadets recoiled, their eyes wide with shock and fear. "This is it," Alan said, his voice louder now, ringing with authority. "You've been through the trials of the predators. You've learned how to fight to survive, but now you face the most important part of all." The chamber's light grew blinding. The symbols twisted faster, the hum of energy rising to a deafening roar. The walls began to close in slowly, relentlessly, pushing them toward the center of the room. "You will not survive this world by force," Alan continued, his tone calm yet urgent. "You will survive through understanding." "Understanding what?" Zil shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "What is this place?" Alan's gaze turned toward him, unflinching. "It's not about the walls. It's not about the symbols. It's about what's inside you." Vrel didn't understand. He couldn't. Not yet. The light exploded again, and for a moment, everything went white. Vrel's vision blurred. His body felt weightless, as though it were being pulled in all directions at once. The very air around them seemed to scream with energy, the room bending and twisting, warping as if reality itself was being torn apart. And then suddenly it stopped. The light dimmed, and the room returned to its former state. But now, different. The walls were no longer shifting. The air no longer hummed with unbearable tension. It was still. The symbols had vanished, and the room had returned to a quiet, peaceful calm. Yet something had changed. Vrel looked around, his breathing heavy, his heart pounding in his chest. The other cadets were staring at him, their faces a mixture of awe and confusion. Alan, however, seemed oddly satisfied. "What just happened?" Jakar asked, his voice small. Alan turned to face him, his expression serene. "What happened is simple. You've made it to the end." Vrel's mind raced. He looked around at the cadets. They were all breathing heavily, their bodies tense from the overwhelming pressure of what they had just experienced. But there was something else, something different in their eyes now, a glimmer of understanding, a deeper awareness. "You've faced what was in front of you. You've survived," Alan said, his voice soft now. "But the real test is this. What are you going to do with what you've learned?" The question hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Alan's gaze moved over each of them, lingering just a little longer on Varel. "You're not the same as when you came here. None of you are. You've seen what this world is capable of. You've felt it, and now you will carry it with you." A long silence stretched between them before Alan spoke again, his tone unwavering. "That's the final lesson, cadets. Surviving Earth is not about defeating the predators or conquering this planet. It's about accepting it, about becoming part of it, understanding that this world doesn't need to be beaten, it needs to be embraced." The cadets stood in silence, their minds reeling. Varel's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't yet comprehend all that Alan had said, but he knew this. He wasn't the same. None of them were. Alan had taught them more than survival. He had taught them something far greater. With one last glance at the chamber, Alan motioned toward the door. The final door. It slid open. Beyond it lay the vast, unyielding wilderness of Earth. The predators, the creatures, the beauty, the danger, the real challenge. But now they were no longer outsiders. They weren't mere cadets lost on a strange world. They were something more. They were Earth's students, and Earth had shown them its most important lesson. Scene fades to the narrator standing in front of an alien landscape, the screen slowly transitioning to the channel's logo. Thank you so much for joining us on this incredible journey through Earth's most unexpected trials. From the depths of gravity-defying hikes to the shocking truths of survival, we've seen our cadets evolve in ways none of us could have predicted. But this story isn't over. There's so much more to uncover, and we want you to be part of that adventure. If you enjoyed the twists and turns, the drama, and the wild surprises that came with Earth's brutal lessons, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an episode of our wild sci-fi stories. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What did you think of Earth's greatest challenges? Drop a comment below and let us know. Until next time, keep watching, keep wondering, and keep exploring the unknown. Thanks for your support, and see you in the next adventure. Fade out.